From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
The fight between gaming giants IGT and Twin River is the main event at the State House this fall, with 2 hearings last week and more to come. Governor Gina Raimondo wants lawmakers to extend IGT's contract to run lottery operations for another 20 years, while Twin River is demanding the lucrative contract be put out for bid so they can have a shot at it. At stake, $400 million in annual state revenue. This week, both sides are in our studio to make their case. Robert Vincent, chairman of IGT Global Solutions, and Rhode Island president of Twin River, Mark Crisafulli. Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the program is Eyewitness News reporter Ted Nesi. Robert Vincent, chairman of IGT Global Solutions. Good to have you on the program.
Thank you for having me.
So I'm going to guess that you feel very confident about IGT's product. You're the chairman of the company, and I'm sure you have the best product, the best services to continue to deliver on the contract here in Rhode Island. So if that is the case, why fight the competitive bidding process? Why not just bid and win, Bob?
This is an economic development agreement started in 2003, where the state decided to link up our contracts with the lottery along with our commitment to maintain 1,000 people here throughout the 20 years of that contract. It's an economic development agreement, happens to contain some contracts for services we have provided traditionally to the lottery and to the gaming program at Twin River. When you look at it, you're looking at a company that's been able to guarantee 1,000 jobs over that period, with a payroll now of about $110 million that's generating about $320 million in economic activity in the state. That's from a study we had done by a professor at Bryant, who presented that to the House of Representatives. So what you see here is really a complete economic development agreement. I know it's very comfortable to say, oh, put it out to bid. I don't know how you put out $110 million worth of payroll, $320 million worth of economic activity for the state, and do that fairly and do it in a way that you can review it and come to a conclusion. I think what you need to do is look at the contracts that are involved here. Look at them and say, are they fair? Are they market driven? You know, the Speaker of the House talked about this in one of his presentations, where he said, you know, it's an economic development agreement. We may never know or totally know what we would have gotten for value out there, but sometimes there's an exception to the rule of, and when it comes to an economic development agreement like this, we think it's deserving of that exception.
How profitable is this contract for IGT compared to other states? Is Rhode Island, are you getting a better deal from around? Is that part of why it's worth it?
It's a good contract. We enjoy it. It's not our largest contract by far. It's not, we don't talk about profitability of individual contracts, but it's a good one, but it's not even in the top 10.
Your proposal would add an additional 100 jobs to the 1,000 already in Rhode Island. IGT has repeatedly been penalized for missing prior benchmarks over the years. How would lawmakers believe that you're not going to continue to miss those?
Well, repeatedly, that's an interesting phrase. But one year we missed it by 10 people. We have some ups and downs in our employment, and as you look at it, and we've been willing to work with the state. We self-identify when that happens, by the way. It's not, and we've worked with the state to come up with ways to make up for that shortage. And from time to time, you're either recruiting positions. We've gone through a change in the state's attitude as how they count positions as well, from where they were in the beginning to where we are now. But that's fine. We're comfortable with that, and we're committed to doing it. And we recognize that if by chance you don't make it, there are penalties involved. That's fine.
You've been pretty dismissive of IGT as a whole, of Twin River's talk about them being in some kind of consortium that would bid for this contract if there was bidding. We now know they're saying they'll partner along with Camelot of London with Intralot, which is one of your competitors in the technology gaming space. There's only a few companies that do that. Does that mean that at this point, with Intralot's help, Twin River could conceivably do the work that you do now, you didn't think so before?
Honestly, there's been a number of proposals from Twin River. They started out by wanting to do everything, take over the entire operation that IGT has. That got modified. It was modified again. It seems to happen on the eve of every hearing that we have. Camelot was introduced, and all of a sudden Camelot doesn't have technology, so you have two groups saying they'll take over technology when they have none of their own. Then Intralot was introduced the other day. I look at it, and we understand these companies. We understand what they do. Intralot is someone in the industry. I don't think it's viewed as a top-tier provider. In 3 states where they've bid, and they've bid low prices, the states decided not to take their bid because of the risk involved and the capabilities and resources of the company. We know Camelot well. Camelot we work with in the United Kingdom. What they're doing is trying to expand out of that license that they have, and they're going around the country in the U.S. trying to find more business for themselves. I understand that process. Camelot and Intralot bid in Florida for the lottery there and were disqualified as not having the necessary resources or capabilities to fulfill that contract. So I think you have to give a very critical view of what's being proposed. It changes a lot, and I think what and that's fine. They can say whatever they want to say, but what you have is here now. We have IGT, the leader in the industry, by far. About 80% of revenues in the United States, lottery revenues in the United States, flow through IGT systems. We are here. This has become a corporate headquarters for us. We have high-paying, good-paying jobs here. So proposals that say, "Oh, we'll keep the state whole," what are you keeping whole? You're really going to replace $110 million payroll and $320 million of economic activity? So I think there needs to be some scrutiny of what's being proposed, because I think guarantees.
Isn't that
what
the bidding process would be? I mean, you sort of just brought me back to my first question. If Intralot has gone into states with a low bid and they failed in Florida, and you're the big dog in town.
If you're talking about bidding lottery contracts, that's fine. We're not talking about the same thing. I'm talking about an economic development agreement that contains commitments for 1,100 jobs.
But
there aren't 1,100 people.
But tied to a contract, right?
Oh yeah, the contracts are involved. There aren't 1,100 people sitting on the border waiting to come here. There's a discussion. Oh, we have a plan. We have a plan. We're here now. We're here now, we're active in the community, we're generating the kind of economic development that the state wanted and the state has gotten. They've benefited dramatically from the employment level commitments. We've changed as a company dramatically over the years. Rhode Island has been protected by this agreement. And all we're saying is, when you're looking forward, we'd like to know what the relationship's going to look like going forward. We're willing to extend and continue what we have, which are market-driven rates that you have there. That's easy to figure out. And I think you need to do the comparison with other markets. The state did that. You heard the administration present their plan. They went through and looked at other comparable states, not looked at some trade journal or something like that, looked at other states in detail and became very comfortable with the fact that they're paying market-driven rates. The deal is fair. And if the deal is fair, no one's against the jobs. No one's against the economic impact that we're having.
This debate it's now October. There's more hearings scheduled for this month. Has IGT sort of given up on the idea of getting a floor vote like had been originally discussed this fall? Do you think it's going to kick into next year's General Assembly session?
We haven't even presented yet to the Senate. So we're in the middle of this process. And we're going to see the process through. I think people have been open and fair in the way they've gone about doing this. The House had 2 hearings. They may have more. We haven't really heard. The Senate has 3 more hearings coming up. We haven't even presented yet to the Senate. So we're in the middle of this process. We're going to see it through and do the best we can in presenting our case and making sure we answer questions of the folks that are out there. And we'll see where that goes.
The contract isn't up till 2023. A lot of the discussion around why to do it so early has been if the state went another direction, it would take time to transfer the technology and all. But is there a point where IGT walks away from this discussion then? If because theoretically, if they stick with IGT, they could extend you a month before the contract ends because you're already here.
Many things could happen. This conversation started because we as a company would like to understand what the future is going to look like for us right here. We know there's a great deal of lead time in converting systems like this that are so core and critical to the 3rd largest revenue source the state has. So we've asked to look at where this relationship is going to go. We are consolidating our company. We've gone through a number of mergers and acquisitions over the years. Again, Rhode Island's been protected during that process, but if the state doesn't have an intent to continue with the employment level commitments we have or go in an extension to the contract we have, we need to consider our options. We have many. We're a large international company, great presence in the United States and many other states where it would be convenient and efficient to do our business there. There isn't a desire to dismantle what's in Rhode Island. It's working. It's good. Our lottery business is leading that industry. And there's a desire for us to preserve what's here. we value what's going on here. It really are the people that are propelling us to be the leader in the world. But if we're not going to have the commitments that we have currently, then we like to look at our business differently.
I just want to briefly pause from the Twin River IGT discussion, if we can, just tap into your expertise in the gaming industry. And we can get back to it if we want.
Sure.
But I'm just curious, from IGT perspective, what is the biggest trend in gaming? In other words, what's next in the world of gambling and gaming and lottery, do you think?
Well, that's a pretty broad question. I think each of them break down kind of differently. You're seeing a great deal more focus on systems in the lottery business and the value they can have in driving your business. That's why, when you look at lotteries, when they go out for RFPs and they look at the kinds of things that are being presented to them, they're not going with the lowest bidder. They're going with the most capable bidder that can drive revenues. You're in a competitive marketplace. You're in convenience stores and other places. You're trying to sell tickets, and you want to make sure you understand your customer, you understand your marketing programs real well. So they're looking for the depth of expertise that companies like ours have in helping them to drive revenues. On the gaming side, it's really about the experience. There's a lot, machines come and go, and if anybody can really explain to you why elephants do better than diamonds, great, you'll make a lot of money in this industry.
Is that true? Elephants machines do better than diamond machines?
No, it was just
I believe it.
I think it's buffaloes, actually. There's a lot that goes into that. Again, it's about customer relationships. It's about giving them a complete experience when they show up at the door, knowing that they're comfortable, knowing that they like what they're doing. Folks go off for a little bit of entertainment. In Rhode Island, they go to Twin River, probably, husband and wife might go 3 or 4 times a month, so you have to give them an experience. Make sure the machines are good, but give them a total experience where they're having they see the entertainment value in it. And that usually comes down to systems. It usually comes down to a lot of amenities and things like that.
A lot of the discussion actually going to the machines on the floor of the casinos, a lot of the discussion has been around that as you talk about extending the contract. And the lottery just took away some of IGT's machines, and even the governor's administration has suggested they want stronger upgrade requirements in the new contract to make sure, has IGT not always given Rhode Island and that the Twin River casinos, the best and the brightest of your machines?
To be honest, no. I think that's not the case. What we see here is the makeup of the floor at Twin River, and Twin River has done well as a facility overall in gaming revenues in comparison to its competition. I think the administration did a good job of showing over the last 3 or 4 years that Twin River has been growing at a steady pace, while others in the marketplace have been declining, in Connecticut in particular. We've gone through a period of time when we have not. There's an efficiency program that says you really have to, if you have 80% of the machines on the floor, you need to generate 80% of the revenues. That's simply how it is. And we've done well in that efficiency program. On a recent one, some of the machines did not stand up that well and were reduced. Many of them were in difficult locations, but then when you have that percentage of the floor, a certain percentage are going to be in bad locations that are disadvantaged. It doesn't mean that somebody who walked in and they went to a machine, they didn't have a good experience, they didn't leave the facility, they walked to another machine and played that machine. So the whole notion that there's more revenue to be gotten with better machines count, and they're important. But when you have a broad, big footprint like you do, yes, from time to time you're going to be refreshing and upgrading, and that's all pretty healthy.
Robert Vincent, Chairman of IGT Global Solutions, thanks very much for joining us on the program. When we come back, the other side of the coin, Mark Crisafulli from Twin River. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my left, Eyewitness News reporter Ted Nesi. Our guest on the second half is the Vice President of Twin River, Rhode Island, Mark Crisafulli. Mark, thanks for joining us on the program. One of the advantages...
President of Twin River, Rhode Island. You just demoted him.
I did. I even wrote it down as Vice President. I'm sorry. President of
I think
Twin River, Rhode Island.
you're also Vice President of all of Twin River, right?
EVP.
So
so it's kind of right.
protect my voice.
Yeah. All right, look, you're on the second half, but there's an advantage to that. You can respond to what you heard from Bob Vincent on the first half from IGT. What was the biggest thing that stood out to you? I mean, he made the argument that this isn't about a contract. This is about economic development. This is about a business that has 1,000 jobs in Rhode Island, and yeah, sure, we have a contract with the state. How do you respond to that?
A couple of quick responses. First of all, he talks about the $110 million payroll. They're not willing to guarantee that payroll. They're guaranteeing jobs at $15.75 an hour, and we think we can bring even better economic development to the state by also building a corporate headquarters, investing another $50 million at Twin River. The second thing was on the machines and the performance of the machines. It matters immensely. The original deal, they only had 50%. They now exercise monopoly control, and they're looking to change Rhode Island law to give them that monopoly control into the future. That is Twin River's #1 issue. The machines alone generate $300 million a year for the state taxpayers, and we need the absolute best product. And the last thing I would just point out is, you know, he made a point of saying these are market-driven rates. We're very confident we can demonstrate the state is overpaying for the systems by about $300 million.
One thing, Mark, that comes up is people say, well, yeah, we're overpaying for the systems, but we get to be the lottery hub and there's jobs in the tower and everything else. I mean, when you at Twin River do the math to try to make your case, do you take into account that, you know, there are jobs in Rhode Island that it sounds like IGT wouldn't otherwise need to have to run the lottery here?
Yeah, absolutely. And we think there's so much excess profit in this deal that it's very easy for our shareholders and investors to come in and say, we can give the state a better deal, create 1,100 jobs, and still make excess profits. And that's one of the things that's so attractive about it.
And I know, Mark, there'll be people watching Sunday morning looking at you saying, Mark, you wrote this deal. You were, because you worked for GTech when it was GTech, and you were very closely involved when Governor Kucheri did the original one. I mean, you know, was it a bad deal then, and now you're on the other side? No. So you're admitting to us, you know, you pulled the wool over our eyes?
It was a very good deal then, but it's a much better deal and very different from the deal now. The key value to the state in that deal was the building downtown, right? It was a $70 million hard construction investment in an area that hadn't had a building built in 20 years and it attracted investment. There's no such building here, right? At the time, the revenue source for the state was protected. GTech then only got 50% of the machines, and the other 50% were by third parties. Now you're talking about 85%, right? The $100 million of investment then had to happen within the first 5 years. This $150 million has to happen over time. There are several other ways that this is a very different deal from the one in 2003. Even just look at the revenues, right? GTech's first year revenues back in the 2003 deal was only 30 million, okay? Compared to the 55 or 57 million they're getting a year right now. But most importantly, there was no competitor back then. And there's a competitor stepping up right now saying, we want a chance to compete. We're not asking for the business. Just give us a chance to compete and let the state win.
No, there's it's plural. There's competitors. Because can you understand why lawmakers would be hesitant to blow up a contract with a one-stop shopping company, IGT, that, as you heard from Bob in the first half, they control 75 to 80% in the country. They obviously, you know, states think they know what they're doing, to go with a proposal that is a patchwork of companies put together, Camelot, Intralot, Twin River, just to do the same job.
So I can understand why there'd be hesitance to that, but that's why you have a bidding process to vet it. But understand, IGT is a patchwork as well. They've just chosen to do their patchwork on the machine side. So they're only providing 40 or 45% of the machines, and they have a patchwork with 5 other partners to provide the balance of those machines. And you could just as easily argue, why is IGT the company that gets to decide how many of IGT's competitors' machines end up in the state? It's really hard to try and apply one principle to this whole thing, because almost every reasonable criticism that you or others could have against the lottery side, respect to us, goes against IGT on the machine side. And that is really kind of what's been the most important issue here for Twin River from day one. Give us a balanced floor. Don't allow IGT to have monopoly control over the machines. That's the issue that caused this to come here. And the only reason we're competing for the lottery is because the executive branch has determined we are going to bundle 85% of the machines in with the lottery systems. If those were separated out the way every other state in the country does
You would drop your proposal on the lottery?
We would be focused on the machine side, absolutely. And that's where we started. You know, we were talking before flippantly, but it was serious. Twin River's very first position here was simply do the deal from 2003. If the state wants to overpay on the system side, that's the state's business. Don't harm us on the machines, okay?
To your point about monopoly and control, and I think you're getting a big hearing on that from people because there is a concern. On the other hand, let's say you go out to bid and the state's looking at Twin River. If Twin River and its consortium got the machines and the central system, and then was still the operator of the 2 state-owned casinos, Twin River, what leverage would the state have over Twin River? You say we have no leverage over IGT. Imagine how little leverage would be over Twin River when you would be the total and complete linchpin of the gambling revenues. I mean, how would, I guess switching over to Twin River seems like it would just create a different person who the state would have trouble holding to account.
Well, I think that's a fair concern. It's one of the reasons why the state should go to a competitive bidding process and really think through exactly what it wants to buy and how it wants to buy it. Right? To set this RFP up properly, if they want a bundled business basis so that they can get the jobs in the RFP, which we would bid on, and compete for it all, that's great. But they should also break it into the component parts. And then you can manage this the way other states manage it, where you might have different providers for different components, and the state would save $15 or $20 million a year. But in that scenario, Ted, if it was all Twin River with our partners, you have our partners as well. And our partners are backed by shareholders that have almost $150 billion in assets and are very liquid. You're putting a lot of faith right now in IGT to run all the systems, who has $8 billion in debt, right? So there are real challenges there as well. And I just think it screams to a fair, open, competitive process where financial wherewithal, where concentration of assets, where experience running these things, all of those factors go into a fair bidding process, and the best company wins.
We are talking to Mark Crisafulli, president of Twin River, Rhode Island. Mark, I want to talk about Twin River now. We'll get away from this fight for a second. We can go back to it. But how are things going at Twin River? But specifically, I guess I wanted to know, have you been to Encore in Boston yet?
Yes.
Okay. What'd you think?
It's a spectacular property. It shows that they spent $2.6 billion and that they have an effective tax rate of 25%, and we have an effective tax rate of 70%.
Okay. So table games at the casino in Lincoln took a 40% hit in August compared to a year earlier. Slots revenue declined by 16%. What are you doing to take back the business you've lost in the casinos to Massachusetts, and what are next month's numbers going to show?
Okay, so a couple of questions there. We did take a hit. As we said publicly, we were looking forward to seeing the post-Labor Day numbers to see if performance would start to bounce back. We're not in the business of releasing that as a public company, and the lottery gets to release that. We remain cautiously optimistic about what the future will hold, but as a public company, I can't make future projections for you. There are a number of things that we did in the last couple of years leading up to this to try and position ourselves. We invested $170 million of real money to acquire Newport Grand, and anyone could have acquired it and moved it, but we did it, and we were the only bidder to do it. And we built Tiverton. As a result of that, we built a hotel in Tiverton, we built a hotel in Lincoln, we built our new sports book and cafe, and now we're having very productive discussions with the lottery about the next layers of investments that we want to make to continue to improve the offering for our consumers. We also went out of our way to secure the right to do additional promotional points to attract our customers, even though that led to us giving business to IGT in Mississippi in order to help get their approval to allow us to do more promotional points. We've asked the government for better machines. That was something they were very resistant to give us in the spring, because at the time they had negotiated giving IGT 100% control of our floor. Since then, as you indicated in the past, the lottery finally had to admit IGT's machines were underperforming. They took some away. We wish they would have taken more and sooner, but at least they took some away. And even more important than that, we've finally seen a change in IGT's buying behaviors. So the number one slot company by far in the country is Aristocrat. It's not IGT. They used to be number one. Now they're 3 in most metrics. Aristocrat's the best. That's what everyone wants. We went almost 5 full years at Twin River and Lincoln without getting a single Aristocrat machine, because IGT decides when we get Aristocrat machines, and IGT makes decisions in its own interest as opposed to the interests of the state of Rhode Island and Twin River, right? So they have a real conflict of interest there. They have to decide to spend more to get a competitor's product and put it on our floor.
For the record, I did try to pull out of the fight, but you pulled us back in on that one.
Mark's a good lawyer. He knows what he's doing.
So coming back to that, though, the good news is that between the machines that the lottery took away and IGT's changed buying behavior, we've now got almost 600 great new machines coming into the facility in the next month. We've already started to promote that, and we'll promote that more as soon as they're live and on the floor to give our players a better experience.
I'm sure we have Twin River customers watching this morning, and I have to tell you, Mark, when when I post a Twin River story, or when we put it out, when I'm on the radio, we will hear from customers who complain they feel like there aren't enough people working at Twin River. They'll say they feel like the company isn't investing as much as it should in upkeep. What do you say to them? Those are your customers. I'm not talking, and I don't think they're IGT people calling in to be mean. Like, it seems like they're legit customers who do like the casino experience. What do you say to those folks who think you guys need to step up your game a little bit there?
Whether they're right or wrong, they're the customer, and so they're right. So if we need to do a better job, we need to do a better job. And it's something we're open to exploring. As I indicated, we spent a tremendous amount of money, $170 million in the last 2 years. It seems like now that that's behind us, we need to focus a little more on the core, and we're very happy to do that.
Real quick, we have less than a minute left. State launched mobile sports betting over the summer. Do you have any idea of how many people have signed up?
We do. Sign-ups have been strong. I leave it to the lottery to disclose that information. It's not up to us. We don't control the information, but we've been happy with the progress. It's been a good rollout, and we're optimistic about what that could mean in the future. But
without giving out the numbers, because you keep saying the state has to do it, are you hitting the benchmarks? Are you above, below?
We're very comfortable with how it's rolling out, and I'm not trying to be difficult, but listen, we have a very close partnership with the lottery on issues like this, and it's not for us to disclose information that they control.
All right, Mark Crisafulli, president of Twin River, Rhode Island, thank you very much for joining us in the program. We did have Bob Vincent, chairman of IGT Global Solutions, on the first half. If you missed it, it's on WPRI.com, and of course, through our podcast on iTunes. For Ted Nesi, I'm Tim White. We'll see you next week on Newsmakers.